It's popular to think that there is no difference between white people and black people aside from the color of their skin. Just plug a black person into a white organization and give them that chance and they'll thrive. No, it doesn't work that way. It's not that easy. Why do black church services feel so performative while white churches are so quiet? Why do black people freestyle while white people like to have everything laid out and planned to a T? Why is it that black culture and white culture clash? The way we say things, the way we do things, the way we talk about things, the way we express ourselves feels like oil and water. No mystery. It's part of the grand design. Let's explore this more. This symbol that you see right here is often referred to as the Yin-Yang symbol, and it is more properly called the Tajitu. This circle, this symbol that you have probably seen many, many times, but overlooked the fact that it is one of the most profound symbols that humanity has ever created. It is an explanatory symbol that in a very highly distilled and simple way describes the construction of the universe. We have these two opposite energies, the yin and the yang. The yin, the feminine, the dark, the receptive, the emotional. The yang, the rational, the assertive. In each, you see part of the other. There is, let's look at it as the opposite of male and female. The feminine side has some masculine in it, and on the masculine side, there are feminine qualities, because we all possess something of our opposite. And it varies. Some men have a large feminine side to them. Some have a very, very small feminine side. And conversely, some women have a very large, masculine energy, relatively speaking. And some have a very small amount. They're very, very feminine. This is the same way with the races. The general divide in the races is toward a tendency toward emotionality versus a tendency toward rationality. The yin energy, the darker skinned energy tends to be more emotional. The yang energy, the whiter cultures tend to be more rational. But humanity is all of it together. We are our emotional side and our rational side. We've talked about this in science. We have this hemispheric arrangement in our brains. The left side and the right side of the brain complement one another, the rational and the emotive. Neither is better than the other. We need both in balance. So this yin-yang symbol explains this relationship between the races. And I want us to dig deeper into it so that we get out of this idea of conflict and battle and antagonism, and we get more into a bigger zoomed out picture of balance, and each side needing the other, and each side having some of the other in it. And at the end of this, as always, I don't want us to just talk about how things are. If we want to shift into positive change in our lives, what can we do with this insight, with this awareness of how the races operate in this balance? What can we do if we want to apply that insight to our lives to make things better? So let's first talk about the yin side, the black side. It prioritizes intuition. and expressiveness and feeling and emotion. Let me give the caveat yet again. All human beings are capable of the full range of expression of all these things, from utterly emotional without any rationality to complete rationality, almost devoid of emotion. Any human being lives along some part of that spectrum. We are very, very complex, okay? But there are patterns, and there are general energies that we can be aware of. And the general energy of the Yin people is toward emotionality. It is toward looseness and unstructured approach to life. The Yang side, the white side, prioritizes order and rationality and process. Yang people build systems for long-term stability, sometimes at the expense of personal expression. Here's an important thing to understand. These two things often collide, right? A black person going into a white church where everyone is sitting reverently and paying attention to the person at the front of the congregation, quietly and attentively, in contemplation. A black person walking, your average black church attendee walking into that environment is going to go, this is boring. You're missing the whole point of the exercise. You're not filled with the Spirit. You're all up in your heads. Meanwhile, a white worshiper would go into a black church and say, why didn't you start? I was here at 11 o'clock and this thing didn't get started until 11:45. And in my church, we generally start at 11 and we end by noon. And here you started at 11:30 and you didn't end until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Making me crazy. And then when you got started, it's just all this hyper emotionality and all this stuff. And I was just kind of overwhelmed, kind of fried my circuits. So each is kind of mystified by the other's approach. And sometimes that can feel like it produces friction, like one side is saying, this is better than yours. The quiet, contemplative, rational, orderly approach to worship is better than this more emotive, performative, looser, improvisational approach. That, a black worshiper would say, this is far better. I love getting lit. I love feeling the emotionality of my entire congregation, that we swell to the shared emotional, spiritual experience that's just profound and elevating. Y'all don't get that, white people. Well, I can tell you that white people do get that. This is you just have got to get dialed into the difference in the way the cultures operate. White people can get to that same highly ecstatic, transformative, vibrational state, which is what the black person was describing with this emotional version of it. The white person can get to that ecstatic state through another portal. It is more cerebral. It is about recognizing how everything fits together, and the glory of God through this lens is more about the awe of all of it and its glorious design. That when the brain senses this connectedness of all and sees how it all fits together, that in and of itself is an ecstatic experience that is the equivalent of this highly exuberant, emotional, celebratory kind of vibe that can happen in the black church. They're just different expressions of a similar vibrational state. They're both high vibration. One is just a high vibration of the rational processing, high cognitive vibration, and the other is more of a high emotional / spiritual vibration. But together, if you can combine both of those, if you could combine ideally, that would be the ideal thing, right? Be right on the razor's edge of this transcendent rational awareness combined with this open-hearted experiential awareness of the energy, the vibe of it all, those two things together, yeah? That's the beauty when we back up and get out of this is better than that. The beauty is to behold this and that together in the perfection of it all, not the animus and the antagonism and superior, inferior kind of argument. This is beyond that kind of duality. You've got to get beyond good and bad, better and worse, into both work together and are necessary balancing energies that are a reflection of our humanity. Now, where does this friction show up? It shows up everywhere we interact as Black and white cultures. This friction often can arise even in communication styles. If a Black manager, again, we're talking about patterns and we're talking about general statements here. There are absolute exceptions to all this. If your average Black manager who is more along this yin kind of polarity, if he were to bring someone in to discuss their performance or to try to resolve a conflict, he would be more contextually sensitive. He would be sensitive to where that person was in that day in and of themselves in their whole life. Is their mother sick? Has their mother been sick for a while, and has that brought in stress? He would factor, is this the right time to even have this conversation? There are bigger things at play than solving this business problem so that we can optimize profitability. That there is a human context that is given meaningful, significant consideration. This yin Black manager in this kind of mentality would be sensitive to, like, looking at his department like a mobile, right? You know, the mobiles with the string, and then you have these bars and different things hang off of them, right? We made them in school. And if you touch one, it affects the balance of everything. It is a system. So he would be aware that if he calls this person in and has a conversation with them to try to straighten this out, that the minute that person leaves the office, it's going to set into motion an entire kind of sequence of reactions and actions, and a whole dynamic is going to emerge out of that one conversation. So this more contextually aware person is going to be sensitive to that. He's going to be aware of the personality of that person. Do they take feedback and correction well, or do they need to be handled in a softer, more specific way? That's what a highly yin kind of person would do. Guess who else looks at things like that, takes that kind of processes interactions, social interactions through that kind of lens? Women. It's a very feminine kind of approach. Now let's compare that to the yang, the white kind of approach. I've got a to-do list. I wrote it at the beginning of the day. This is going to be a very orderly day. And I need to do this, 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 this. One of the things that I need to do today is to solve this problem. So I'm going to call John in and I'm going to sit him down. And I know that John has been having a hard time at home and that there are other things going on in the department. But we are going to sort this right now because I need to get through this so that I can get on to the next thing. And John, you're just going to have to kind of suck it up and deal with whatever I'm about to tell you. Suck it up. Learn from it, improve, correct, and let's move on. It's a very kind of business-like, cut and dried kind of Lego arrangement. Black people don't tend to cleave naturally to that kind of interaction. They are more typically contextually sensitive. And white people in that business environment tend to be more agenda and efficiency and rationally oriented. We have a machine here, says the young white person. We have a machine here. It is a system. These are the inputs. These are the outputs. And we are going to make this thing work. And that kind of approach to life can sometimes be seen by Black people as cold-hearted and inhumane. Meanwhile, white people would look at the more improvisational looseness, emotiveness of Black people and their general social nature and the way they like to socialize with one another inside of work and outside of work. A white person might look at that as inefficient, unproductive, and not helpful to achieving the outcomes and the objectives. So you have one group that values the experience of this. How does it feel to come to work? That's a big thing. Whether we optimize for productivity and optimize for profitability and making year-over-year progress and improving and innovating, and whether we do all that or not, are we enjoying ourselves in the here and now? Are we having a good positive human experience? That is a big part of the agenda of the Yin people, the darker side of this Yin-Yang symbol. And meanwhile, the Yang folks are going, we're here to make profit, man. If we don't make profit, the business closes. So I need you to kind of check we want to have a good time. We don't want to sit here and suffer, from 9 to 5, but there's a time and a place for everything. And the time and the place for having fun and socializing and laughing and playing and optimizing for having a good time is outside of work. Okay? But when you show up to work, then the priority is being about the business. And sometimes that does not mean having fun. Most of the time, it's not fun. A lot of time, it's just head down, shoulder to the wheel, nose to the grindstone. And sometimes that's just not fun. We do have to pause and ask a serious question here. Which tends to be the most effective and profitable approach? Black people, if you were to say, boy, I wish the world were more black, and I wish that we weren't so uptight and deadline driven and systems and process and, meeting schedules and deadlines and all that kind of stuff. I wish the world was just more relaxed and it was about us feeling good rather than trying to maximize for profit in this kind of capitalistic paradigm. How would that compete versus the world that we have now? Well, it doesn't compete well. The fact is, it doesn't compete well because you don't see any version of that kind of business world actually working with any kind of consistency. I'd be happy for you to show me where not being on time, we're being disorganized, we're not taking an orderly approach to business, where profit is the goal. I'd like to see where that is successful. It has never been successful in my business experience. I think that surrendering short-term satisfaction and pleasure for long-term success tends to be the rule of the day. This Yang approach to business structure, process, organization, precision, scalability, that's the better rat trap. It won. You can look all around the world. It won. The cultures also have different kinds of ways of thinking about time. In the Black church, it could feel like a Lauryn Hill concert sometimes, right? What time? That's funny. I was at a track meet last year, and it was organized by a black high school. You can tell the difference in track meets that are organized by black schools and black track organizations versus white organizations. I've been to a lot of them, and there have been some very well organized, run on time, efficiently organized ones that black organizations have done. I've seen a few of those, but more often than not, it's going to be the white one that's going to start on time, and the schedule is going to be this schedule, and this event is going to start at this event at this time. It just tends to run a little bit like clockwork. But I was at one of these events that had been structured by a black organization. The long jump was supposed to have happened at 8:30 that morning, and we had shown up very early in the morning to make sure we were there for that event. It ended up that the long jump didn't happen until like 5 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, all the athletes who were scheduled to be there bright and early had kind of either drifted away because that was the only event they were really there for, or they were just sitting around getting cold and bored and, so, but at a certain point, the frustration with this being late had reached a boiling point, even among black people. I remember there was a young black woman sitting next to me, and we weren't talking. I was just in earshot of her. And she goes, "This shit'll make you racist." It's, sometimes it's just too much, right? But we do have these different orientations toward time. And, the goal in the black church is to reach a spiritual, there's a spiritual goal. It is getting spiritually lit. There's a certain vibration, a certain pitch, an energetic pitch that you can arrive at when the whole congregation is in it. And the organ and the music and the drums and the bass and the singer and the pastor and the deacons and the whole congregation are feeling it all together. Whew, I just gave myself shivers recalling experiences like that. But that's the goal. And it is to feel the spirit collectively. And sometimes you can't start that at 11 o'clock precisely. You start it when it feels like it's the right time to start. And you don't end it arbitrarily at noon. You end it when you get there. And sometimes you don't get there until 2 o'clock. Every Sunday is going to be different. It is a different moment, and you have to be dialed into the particularities of that moment to know if you've gotten there, and you know when you've gotten there, because everybody is locked in, and you become aware that we have arrived. Okay? So that's the agenda, is to get to that place of emotion. That is the goal. On the other hand, the belief in the way that white people structure themselves in order to reach a similar goal of high vibration attainment, that goal of awareness, white people have structured rituals. And you see, particularly in Catholic and non-Protestant traditions, highly ritualized kinds of approaches that are intended to create a certain vibrational gate that you pass through as you go higher and higher and higher. I was a Lutheran as a growing up, and so the ritual involved the entrance, right? There was the carrying in of the cross. I was the, what do we call it? Crucifier? I carried the crucifix, the stick, and there's the cross on the top of it, that you came in and kind of the ceremony of bringing it in and planting it and lighting the candles to get the energy going. The visual light has arrived. The light of the world has now symbolically arrived and been set in its place next to the altar. And we have lit these candles, and we have selected a song that is an introduction, and we have selected a verse. And you go through these different stages of this ritual that kind of work like clockwork. And this leads to that, to that, to that, so that by the end, at the end of the service, once the sermon has stopped and has ended and the collection has been passed around and the final words have been, stated by the pastor, then ready or not, we're done. And hopefully we have had an experience and an enlightenment and an awareness that kind of builds on these incremental awarenesses about this idea that we are trying to communicate about God and these humans' relationship and responsibilities in that relationship. Very, very different approaches to time, very different approaches to what the goal of the assembly is. At the root of this is a very essential conflict, at least as we process it in the West. It is the weight that the respective cultures give to emotion versus logic. Black people, yin energied people, tend to believe in emotional truth, this sense of embodied truth, and that I feel it to be so, therefore that is the truth, is what I am feeling in my body. And most of that body experience is driven by emotion. So getting to emotion is akin to getting to a point of truth in that community. On the other hand, logic is the dominant criteria for yang and white culture. If it doesn't make sense, if you can't write a formula or an equation or formulate a logical syllogism, some construction that says this leads to that, and therefore this is the output. You've got to be able to deconstruct arguments to see if they make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, I don't care how you feel. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't work. You may feel all you want about touching that hot stove. You may feel that's a good idea. But there is a logical reality that will not, regardless of how you feel about going over and touching that will be a bad idea. We have lots of data that forms a logical conclusion. And both is highly suspicious of the other's cognitive or processing style, truth-seeking style. Black people tend to be very suspicious of these, Byzantine, complicated rules and formulations and theories and frameworks and all that. I ain't feeling that. I'm not feeling that. No, you're not supposed to feel a rational framework. They're different things. You're not supposed to drink a steak. They're different things, yeah? So white people have a similar distrust of emotionality. They do not trust emotional conclusions. I'm a bit stuck on that side of it as well, I've got to tell you. I'm an artist. I'm emotional. I'm heavily yin with a healthy dose of yang, okay? But I am pretty strong in my emotional nature. It is, I have a strong feminine nature in me. I think that I see it and I mine it. It is part of where my work, my creativity, my art comes from. But I really don't trust myself when I make emotionally based decisions. I find that For me, I find that my intelligence goes down with emotion. If I'm the emotion of, let me say, just the carnal emotion of lust, it makes me lose my brain. I'll lose 50 IQ points. If you get me, much more when I was a younger man, if you get my senses stimulated by a really attractive woman, I lose intelligence meaningfully. If I get really upset, if I'm really mad, I'm not going to make a good decision that I trust. I just don't trust decisions that are made in the heat of the moment. And I've got lots of experience and data, and I think we can all look back across, our experiences with our lives, with our relationships, with our children, with our parents, where we know that on average, it's better to make a decision with a cool and rational head than it is to make a decision based on how you feel at the moment. So, scoreboard, I'm going to give the advantage to Yang. I'm going to give the advantage to rationality. And more broadly, I think that we've got to give recognition to the fact that the Yang model, this rational systems, calculating, formulaic, scaling approach to life and business and society, it's one. Globally, that's the way the system is set up. It works. It just works. There's an efficiency to it that created a better mousetrap. This other yin version had its chance. In fact, it still has its chance every single day, every single moment, to prove itself as a better way of operating in the world. It just hasn't gotten a foothold anywhere that I've seen where it goes, being highly emotional and all of those other yin kinds of traits. I just haven't seen it bear fruit in terms of success at a societal level, where you have prosperity, continuity, growth, progress, metrics of improvement in human wellness, longer lives, lower health issues, lower child mortality, all of those, across those things. I think that we can see that the Western model, which emphasizes more of this order and structure, is kind of the dominant framework. It just works. So what do you do? We don't want to just talk about things. We want to say, what do we do with this awareness? Well, one of the biggest awarenesses that you have to have is that it's just, it's popular among liberal whites to think that there is no difference between white people and black people aside from the color of their skin. Just plug a black person into a white organization and give them that chance and they'll thrive. No, it doesn't work that way. It's not that easy. Because when you have it's like saying, take a black person who is accustomed to celebrating their spirituality in a Southern Baptist church and just transplant them into a traditional Catholic mass on a Sunday instead, and just plug them in. They're all the same, right? That black person will enjoy that experience just as much as they did this other experience. It's church. No. And vice versa, a white person who's that Catholic person, putting them in a Southern black service, they're going to go, what the fuck? Both of them may have a positive experience, and both of them can grow in their awareness and by osmosis kind of grow an appreciation of, wow, when I first came here, this was really weird and odd. But now that I've been here, it starts to click. I kind of see how we both arrive at a similar destination from very different routes, and that destination is similar but very, very different. One is a very emotional, experience-based vibrational attainment, and the other is a more cerebral, logic, rationally based vibrational attainment. both have their value. So I think it's just a matter of knowing that this isn't a plug and play kind of operation, that it does help Black people to have other Black people in a department, in an organization, so that they can feel a kindred spirit and in some way. Otherwise, it puts in almost an undue, unnatural pressure, depending on the person, to totally subvert their own cultural, tastes to a more dominant culture where they just feel out of place. Black people, I understand it. I understand you feeling out of place in white corporations when you don't have other Black people around. I know it's like sitting in that Catholic church service feeling like it's cold and unemotional and uninvolved. I understand it. I don't know that the corporate culture is really going to change in this lifetime, though. And that's what I'm interested in, is solving problems in this lifetime. This paradigm, this black-white yin-yang paradigm, is not going to change because our essential divide isn't going to change. Our essential, emotional and spiritual and cognitive kind of hemispheres, that division of labor in our head, in our spirit, in our culture, is always going to be there. We need the friction. We need the push and pull of these things together. Black people constantly remind white people to be more present in the now. White people aren't saying that to themselves, I need to be more present in the now. But by Black people's orientation toward that approach to living is an object lesson that just presents itself repeatedly over and over and over again. I think there is a certain there's certain cultural envy that white people have to that kind of freedom, that kind of living in the moment, that kind of celebration of the moment that Black people have. I conversely feel that there is a kind of admiration that Black people have for white people's orderliness, the way that they are able to just kind of stay calm and organize and set goals and set up processes and systems, and I'll be damned, they made that thing work. And maybe it inspires Black people to say, I love my emotion, but if I can add some of that structure and rationality game to my game, maybe I can be more successful in business and navigating this yang world. On the other hand, white people can say, I'm feeling oppressed by all of this rule following, by all of this structure, by always having to do the right thing in the right order at the right time and all of this. Sometimes it's good just to burn the instructions and sometimes just make shit up. Yeah, have fun. Break some rules. See what happens. Yeah, it's this almost intentional mischief. Sometimes you need a bit of chaos in the system in order to check out what the outputs are. Within science, I will say that toward the end of this argument of introducing chaos, that most scientific discoveries are mistakes. They're unintentional. A beaker fell over and accidentally combined with this thing. That chaos and that stochastic quality of things is what makes evolution, is the spark of insight and innovation very often. And that we spark one another, this friction between this emotional approach and this rational approach creates a friction that stimulates each side to adopt some of the other in order to strike an equilibrium that works. Yeah. So look, this has been a long one, but this is what I'm here for. I'm here to question everything. I want us to talk about everything. I do not want us to be afraid to talk about things. One of the ways that we are going to improve race relations is by talking about race, not sticking in the same old kinds of tired saws the way we do and say the same things over and over again, but looking at things from a different angle, thinking about it in a different way. That's the way we're going to get through this. And if you like thinking differently, if you like having your brain pulled and stretched, I want you to keep coming back, because that's my commitment to you. Keep on testing, stretching, and asking the hard questions. And that's my promise to you. I'll keep on doing that. In exchange, I want to ask for your subscription, and I'd like to get a thumbs up. All right? Peace.